The iron door of her cell scraped open, flooding the small space with unwelcome light. Elijah squinted, raising a shackled hand to shield her eyes. 3 years in the Emperor's dungeons had taught her what to expect from unexpected visits, pain usually followed by more questions she couldn't or wouldn't answer. "On your feet, traitor," Commander Darius barked, his voice echoing against the stone walls. "His Imperial Highness Prince Alaric wishes to observe today's interrogation." Elijah forced herself to stand despite the weakness in her legs. Once the daughter of House Thalashan, one of the Empire's oldest noble families, she now wore rags stained with blood and grime. Her once lustrous copper hair hung in matted tangles around her gaunt face. Yet something in her emerald eyes remained unbroken, a defiance that had earned her countless lashes. "The noble daughter of traitors," came a cool, measured voice from behind Darius. Prince Alaric stepped into view, his midnight blue robe's immaculate silver embroidery catching what little light filtered into the cell. His face was a study in controlled curiosity. "I expected someone more impressive given your reputation. And I expected the Emperor's son to have better hobbies than watching prisoners being tortured," Elijah replied, her voice hoarse from disuse but steady. The prince's eyebrow arched slightly, the only indication her barb had landed. "Bring her to the questioning chamber," he commanded. 2 guards yanked her forward, dragging her through the winding corridors of the underground prison. The questioning chamber, a generous name for a room designed for torture, was already prepared, with its array of implements laid out with disturbing precision. "We'll continue where we left off," said Magister Voss, the Emperor's chief interrogator. His thin fingers traced the edge of a red-hot iron, the location of the remaining rebel sympathizers in the eastern provinces. Elijah said nothing. There was nothing to say. Most of her family's allies were dead, and those who weren't had fled beyond the Empire's borders. Her silence had protected them for 3 years. It would protect them still. "Your stubbornness serves no purpose," Prince Alaric said, studying her with those calculating gray eyes. "The rebellion is crushed. Your family name is erased from the imperial records. You alone remain, and for what? A loyalty to ghosts." Something stirred inside her at his words, not fear or anger, but something older, deeper. A warmth began in her chest, spreading outward to her fingertips. "Begin," the prince commanded, stepping back. Magister Voss pressed the hot iron toward her exposed forearm. Elijah braced for the familiar agony, but the moment the metal touched her skin, a blinding light erupted from within her. The shackles binding her wrists shattered like glass. The guard stumbled backward. Magister Voss dropped the iron with a clatter, his face pale with shock. Prince Alaric alone stood his ground, though his eyes widened in disbelief. Elijah felt power coursing through her veins like liquid fire. The air around her crackled with energy as her feet lifted from the ground. Her matted hair rose around her face, the copper strands suddenly gleaming as if polished. And above her head, materializing from the brilliant light, a crown formed, ancient, elegant, and undeniably powerful. "The crown of ages," Prince Alaric whispered, recognition and fear mingling in his voice. "Impossible." The legendary crown, lost for centuries, now sat upon Elijah's brow as if it had always belonged there. Its power flooded through her, healing her wounds, restoring her strength. Knowledge poured into her mind. The crown was sentient in its way, and it had chosen her. "Seize her," Darius shouted, but the guards who rushed forward were thrown back by an invisible force, crumpling against the stone walls. Elijah lowered herself to the floor, standing tall for the first time in years. Her rags had transformed into flowing garments of silver and white, shimmering with otherworldly light. "The Empire tried to break me," she said, her voice resonating with newfound power. "But the crown has chosen me." Darius drew his sword with trembling hands. What sorcery is this?" Before he could strike, an invisible force wrenched the weapon from his grasp and pinned him to the wall. The other guards cowered, their former prisoner now the source of their terror. Only Prince Alaric remained composed, though his face had paled considerably. He studied her with new eyes, not as a prisoner, but as a force he had severely underestimated. "The crown of ages chooses its bearer," he said quietly. "It hasn't appeared in over 500 years. His gaze met hers, calculation giving way to something like respect. "It seems, Lady Elijah Thalashan, that you are more significant than any of us realized." Elijah felt the crown's power humming through her, ancient and terrible and wonderful. For 3 years she had been a prisoner, broken and forgotten. Now she stood before her captors transformed, no longer a victim but a queen. And they would all bow before hers. "We need to leave, now." Prince Alaric's words cut through the stunned silence of the interrogation chamber. His calculating eyes darted to the door, where the sounds of approaching guards echoed down the corridor. Elijah stood firm, the crown of ages still radiating power around her. "Why would I go anywhere with you? You're the Emperor's son." And you're about to be overwhelmed by every Imperial guard in this fortress if we don't move, Alaric countered, already stepping toward a hidden door camouflaged in the stone wall. My father will have you dissected to understand the crown's power. Is that what you want? The shouts grew closer. Elijah hesitated only a moment before following him through the concealed passage. The crown's energy formed a protective barrier around her as they navigated the narrow, winding tunnel. Where does this lead? She demanded, her newly restored voice echoing against the damp walls. To freedom if you're quiet enough, Alaric replied over his shoulder. I've used these passages since I was a child, no one else knows of them. They emerged in a small courtyard where a pair of midnight black horses waited, tethered to a post. Alaric mounted one with practiced ease, then extended his hand to her. Lady Thalashin, I believe we have much to discuss, but not here. Elijah studied his outstretched hand. Why would the Emperor's heir help a traitor escape? A grim smile crossed his face. Perhaps I'm not as loyal as my father believes. The distant clamor of alarm bells made her decision. Ignoring his hand, she mounted the second horse herself, the crown dimming slightly but still present. If you betray me, Prince, you'll learn what this crown can do. I'm counting on it, he murmured. They rode through the night, avoiding Imperial patrols, until they reached Alaric's private estate nestled in the foothills beyond the capital. The manor house stood dark and silent, with only a skeleton staff that Alaric had personally selected. My father believes I come here for hunting and other pleasures, Alaric explained as they entered through a side entrance. It's the one place he doesn't have spies. A middle-aged servant appeared, unfazed by their arrival or Elijah's strange crown. The East Wing is prepared, Your Highness, as always. Thank you, Marwan, we weren't followed. Elijah followed Alaric through the spacious manor, alert for any sign of treachery. He led her to an elegant chamber with a balcony overlooking the mist-shrouded mountains. Why, she asked again when they were alone, why help me? Alaric moved to a sideboard and poured 2 glasses of wine. The empire is dying under my father's rule. The provinces starve while he builds monuments to himself. The military grows more corrupt with each passing season. He offered her a glass, which she refused. And then there's the matter of my 3 older brothers who died under suspicious circumstances, leaving me the sole heir. You fear you're next, Elijah concluded. I know I'm next, he corrected, drinking from his own glass. My father doesn't trust anyone, least of all his heir. I need a way to protect myself and the empire. And I'm that way, a convenient weapon for your political ambitions. A necessary ally, he countered. That crown chose you for a reason. The legends say it appears in times of greatest need when the empire faces destruction, if it's chosen you. Then your father's reign is nearly over, she finished. For the first time, Alaric smiled genuinely, precisely. In the days that followed, Elijah explored the boundaries of her new powers while Alaric brought reports from the capital. The Emperor had declared the prison witch a priority for the Imperial forces, offering a fortune for her capture. Meanwhile, the crown of ages remained permanently affixed to her head, though she learned to diminish its glow when necessary. You're getting stronger, Alaric observed one evening as he watched her practice manipulating objects with her mind. But control is still an issue. I'm doing fine, she snapped, levitating a series of delicate crystal ornaments around the room. Are you, because the vase behind you is about to? The crash interrupted him. Elijah cursed as the ancient vase shattered against the floor. You're trying to command the power, Alaric said, stepping carefully through the glass to reach her. The legends say the crown must be guided, not forced. And how would you know that? She demanded, frustration evident in her voice. I've studied the old texts since I was a boy. My mother was fascinated by the crown before she died. She believed it would return in her lifetime. His voice softened with the memory. She would have liked you. The unexpected vulnerability in his admission caught Elijah off guard. Was she, like your father? The opposite in every way, kind where he is cruel, beloved where he is feared. Alaric's gray eyes darkened. Her death wasn't the illness the court was told about. Understanding dawned on Elijah, your father. Alaric nodded once, his face a careful mask again. Get some rest. Tomorrow we work on distance control. But tomorrow brought unexpected danger. Elijah woke to the sound of horses and armored men surrounding the estate. She rushed to Alaric's chambers, finding him already dressed and gathering essential items. The Crimson Guard, he explained tersely. My father's elite hunters, someone must have talked. Your trusted staff. Marwan would never betray me, but one of the others. He shook his head. It doesn't matter now, we need to reach the Whispering Woods. Even the Crimson Guard fears those ancient trees. They escaped through another hidden passage just as Imperial soldiers breached the manor house. Their horses struggled through the rough mountain terrain as they fled toward the distant, mist-shrouded forest that loomed on the horizon. When they finally reached the edge of the Whispering Woods, an arrow whistled past Elijah's ear. She turned to see 3 crimson guards gaining on them, their distinctive red armor gleaming in the morning sun. "Go," Alaric shouted, drawing his sword and wheeling his horse around. "I'll hold them." "Don't be stupid," Elijah snapped, the crown flaring to life on her brow. With a gesture, she uprooted a massive tree, sending it crashing down between them and their pursuers. "Come on." They plunged into the ancient forest, the strange, distorted trees closing around them like protective arms. The air grew still, filled with whispers just beyond hearing. Their horses refused to go deeper, forcing them to continue on foot. As night fell, they made camp in a small clearing. Elijah, exhausted from channeling the crown's power, slumped against a tree trunk. Alaric silently handed her water from his pack before tending to a small fire. "Why did you come back for me?" he asked finally. "You could have escaped alone." Elijah studied him in the flickering firelight. The arrogant prince was gone, replaced by a man who'd risked everything to help her. "Maybe I need an ally too." His eyes met hers across the flames. "Is that all I am to you, an ally of convenience?" "What else could you be?" she challenged, even as something shifted between them. He moved to sit beside her, close enough that she could feel his warmth. "3 weeks ago, I was watching you being interrogated. Now I'm a fugitive in the Whispering Woods with the Empire's most wanted criminal." His hand brushed hers, tentative. "Life takes unexpected turns." "Very philosophical," she murmured, but didn't move away. "Elijah," her name on his lips sounded different, softer. "I need you to know that whatever happens, my allegiance is to you now, not because of the crown, but because of who you are." She turned to respond, but the sincerity in his gray eyes robbed her of words. Instead, she found herself leaning toward him, drawn by something more powerful than magic. Their lips met softly at first, a question rather than a demand. Then, as if answering, Alaric's hand came up to cradle her face, deepening the kiss. The crown of ages glowed softly, bathing them in ethereal light as enemies became something more in the heart of the ancient forest. Dawn filtered through the ancient trees of the Whispering Woods, casting dappled shadows across Elijah's sleeping form. She woke to find Alaric already awake, his back against a tree trunk, watching her with a thoughtful expression. "Good morning," she said, suddenly self-conscious about their kiss the night before. "The woods have accepted you," he replied, nodding toward the crown of ages. "Look around us." Elijah gasped. Overnight, the clearing had transformed. Luminescent flowers encircled their campsite, their petals opening and closing in rhythmic pulses. The trees had shifted, forming a protective barrier around them. "The Whispering Woods are said to be the last remnant of the old magic," Alaric explained. "Before the Empire, before the crown itself." As if responding to his words, the whispers that had haunted the forest edges grew louder, almost comprehensible. Elijah stood, drawn by an inexplicable pull deeper into the woods. "I need to follow it," she said, the crown brightening on her brow. Alaric gathered their meager supplies. "Then we follow it together." They traveled for hours through increasingly strange terrain. Trees twisted into impossible shapes, some resembling faces frozen in wooden expressions. The ground beneath their feet sometimes felt like it was breathing. Finally, they reached a perfect circle of white trees surrounding a pool of water so clear it seemed like liquid crystal. An elderly woman sat beside the pool, her skin as pale as birch bark, her hair a tangle of roots and leaves. "The chosen approaches," she said, her voice like rustling leaves. "And she brings the Emperor's son, how unexpected." Alaric tensed beside Elijah, but she stepped forward confidently. "Who are you?" "I am Eldara, last of the Forest Keepers. We have waited centuries for the crown to choose again." The strange woman gestured to the pool. "Come, see what the crown wishes to show you." Elijah knelt beside the pool. As her reflection appeared, the crown of ages flared brilliantly, and the water's surface changed to show images of the Empire, not as it was now, but as it had been. A place of harmony between magic and order, where rulers served the people rather than dominating them. "The Empire was founded on balance," Eldora explained. "The crown ensures that balance, choosing its bearer when that harmony is threatened. Your family, the Thalassians, were once guardians of that balance before the current Emperor's line seized power." "My father never spoke of this," Elijah whispered. "Many truths were buried by those who feared them," Eldara replied. "But the crown remembers, and now it has chosen you to restore what was lost." For 3 days they remained with Eldara. During daylight hours, the Forest Keeper taught Elijah to communicate with the crown, to channel its powers not through force of will but through clarity of purpose. At night, she and Alaric grew closer, their initial attraction deepening into something neither had expected. On their third night, they lay together beneath the canopy of white trees, the crown casting soft light over their entwined forms. Alaric traced the curve of her face with gentle fingers. "When I first saw you in that cell," he murmured, "I never imagined this." Elijah smiled, leaning into his touch. "A prince and a prisoner, it does seem unlikely." "No," he corrected, his eyes serious. "I never imagined feeling this way about anyone. My entire life has been about survival and strategy. This," he gestured between them, "wasn't part of the plan." She kissed him softly. "Plans change." Their embraces grew more passionate as whispers of magic swirled around them. The crown's light pulsed with each racing heartbeat as they surrendered to desire long denied. In the sacred grove, surrounded by ancient magic, they became lovers, their bodies finding the intimate rhythm their hearts had already discovered. Afterward, lying in Alaric's arms, Elijah felt the crown's knowledge flowing through her with new clarity. "Your father didn't just usurp the throne," she said suddenly. "He tried to claim the crown first, didn't he?" Alaric stiffened slightly. "How did you know?" "The crown is showing me. It rejected him, and his hatred of old magic stems from that rejection." She sat up, eyes wide. "That's why he hunted down so many of the old families, not just for political power, but because they were connected to the magic he couldn't possess." "Including your family," Alaric confirmed. "The Thalashans were the last great house with ties to the old ways. My father feared them most of all." A new determination hardened in Elijah's heart. "Then we must return to my family's lands. If the crown has chosen me, the people will remember the old allegiances." "The eastern provinces are heavily guarded," Alaric warned, "and the Crimson Guard will be hunting us more relentlessly than ever." "I'm no longer afraid," Elijah replied, the crown glowing brighter. "Are you with me, Prince Alaric?" He kissed her hand with formal reverence that contrasted with their earlier passion. "My sword and my heart are yours, my queen." On their final morning in the Whispering Woods, Eldara presented them with gifts: a staff of white wood for Elijah to channel the crown's power, and a dagger of strange, silvery metal for Alaric. "The path ahead is fraught with peril," the forest keeper warned. "The Emperor will sense the crown's awakening and will stop at nothing to destroy its chosen bearer." "Let him try," Elijah replied, her voice carrying the crown's authority. They left the safety of the woods, the crown now fully awakened and bonded to Elijah. As they traveled eastward toward her ancestral lands, they noticed changes in the countryside. Fields that had been barren began to sprout new growth in their wake. People stared in awe as they passed, many falling to their knees at the sight of the legendary crown. Word spread faster than they could travel. By the time they reached the borders of what had once been Thalashan territory, people lined the roads to catch a glimpse of the chosen queen and her princely consort. "They remember," Alaric observed as an elderly farmer presented Elijah with his family's treasured Thalashan banner, carefully hidden for years. "They've been waiting," she replied, accepting the banner with grace, just as the crown was waiting. That night, in the shelter of a loyal farmer's barn, messengers brought news that chilled their blood. The emperor had dispatched not just the Crimson Guard, but his personal legion to the eastern provinces. Villages suspected of harboring crown loyalists were being burned. Examples were being made. In their rough quarters, Alaric held Elijah close. "We've started something we can't control," he whispered into her hair. She placed her hand over his heart, feeling its steady beat. "That's the difference between your father and the crown. He needs control. The crown needs faith." She looked up at him, her green eyes luminous in the darkness. "Do you have faith, Alaric?" His answer was a kiss that conveyed everything words could not: devotion, belief, and the love that had grown between them against all odds. As their bodies joined once more, the crown's light embraced them both, binding their fates together in the quest that lay ahead. Outside, people continued to gather, their numbers growing with each passing hour. By morning, Elijah would face not just followers, but the beginning of an army ready to rise for their chosen queen. The rebel camp sprawled across 3 valleys, cookfires dotting the landscape like earthbound stars. In the 6 weeks since they'd left the Whispering Woods, Elijah's forces had grown from a handful of farmers and villagers to a genuine army. At their center stood a command tent where Elijah, crown glowing softly on her brow, addressed her war council. "The Emperor's forces have pulled back to Westhold," reported General Kaida, a former imperial commander who had defected with her entire battalion after witnessing Elijah's power. "They've fortified the city and wait behind its walls." "A defensive posture," Alaric observed, studying the map spread across the table. "My father rarely defends, he attacks." "Which means it's a trap," Elijah concluded. She had grown into her role as leader, her once gaunt frame now restored to health, her copper hair braided with silver threads that mimicked the crown's design. He wants to draw us into a siege. Messenger horns sounded from the camp's perimeter. Moments later, a scout burst into the tent, face ashen. Your Majesty, Imperial forces are attacking Riverend Village. Civilians, they're targeting civilians. Elijah's eyes met Alaric's across the table. Riverend had been one of the first villages to declare for her, providing food and supplies when their rebellion was still fragile. It's my father's favorite tactic, Alaric said grimly. Make your enemies watch as you punish those who support them. Elijah stood, the crown flaring with her anger. General Kaida, prepare a response force. We ride within the hour. Elijah, Alaric caught her arm as the others left to prepare. This is exactly what he wants, to draw you out, to separate you from the main force. I know, she replied, her voice steady despite the rage burning within her. But if I don't protect them, what kind of queen am I? His expression softened as he pulled her into his arms. The kind who will survive to rule, let me go instead, I can lead the response force. She pressed her forehead to his. Together, we do this together. They rode with 300 of their best soldiers, pushing their horses to their limits. Still, they arrived to find Riverend in flames. Imperial soldiers systematically moved through the village, setting fire to homes where families still sheltered inside. Monster, Elijah whispered, knowing she spoke of Alaric's father. From atop their hill position, Alaric assessed the Imperial force. At least 500 men, elite units from the looks of their armor. Numbers don't matter anymore, Elijah replied, the crown now blazing like a star above her head. She urged her horse forward, alone, ignoring Alaric's protest. As she approached the burning village, Imperial soldiers turned to face this solitary rider. Their captain ordered archers to position. Elijah raised the white wood staff Eldara had given her. The crown's light channeled through it as she spoke a single word of power. A dome of shimmering energy expanded from her position, growing rapidly to encompass the entire village. Imperial arrows dissolved into ash upon striking it. Inside the protective barrier, fires extinguished themselves. Wounded villagers felt their injuries healing. Children stopped crying as an otherworldly comfort embraced them. The Imperial soldiers backed away, terror evident even through their helmets. When Elijah directed the barrier to move forward, they broke ranks and fled, trampling each other in their haste to escape the crown's power. Alaric led their forces into the village, securing it within minutes as the remaining Imperial soldiers surrendered or fled. He found Elijah in the village square, surrounded by kneeling villagers offering thanks for their salvation. That night, as they made camp in the secured village, news arrived from across the province. 3 Imperial garrisons had laid down their weapons upon hearing of Riverend. Soldiers were deserting in unprecedented numbers. The crown's power grows, Alaric observed as they stood on the village walls watching the stars. Or perhaps it's your power that grows. Elijah leaned against him, exhausted but fulfilled. I couldn't have done it without you. He turned her to face him, his expression serious in the moonlight. When this is over, when you take the throne that is rightfully yours, what becomes of us, the chosen queen and the son of her enemy? Instead of answering with words, she drew him into a passionate kiss. Later, in the privacy of the village headman's offered home, their lovemaking carried the desperate edge of those who know greater challenges await them. Alaric worshipped her body with the devotion of a true believer, and Elijah surrendered completely to the one man who had seen her value when she was nothing but a prisoner. I love you, she whispered against his skin, the words she had held back for weeks finally finding voice. No matter what happens, that truth remains. His eyes glistened in the crown's gentle light. Then I can face anything, even my father's wrath. Dawn brought reports that the Emperor had abandoned his defensive position at Westhold. He and his remaining loyal forces had retreated to the imperial capital, preparing for a final stand. More disturbing were rumors that he had turned to forbidden magic, blood rituals and sacrifices to counter the crown's power. He's desperate, Alaric said as they prepared to rejoin their main force. And desperate men are the most dangerous. Elijah touched the crown, feeling its certainty flow through her. So are desperate women. As they rode from the village, the surviving residents lined the road, offering blessings and small tokens of gratitude. A young girl, no more than 7, approached Elijah's horse with a crown of simple wildflowers. For when you don't need to wear the magic one, your majesty, she said with childish seriousness. Elijah accepted the gift, deeply moved. I shall treasure it always. Alaric watched the exchange, a strange expression crossing his handsome features, something between longing and revelation. That night, as they made camp on the road back to their main army, he seemed preoccupied. What troubles you? Elijah asked as they lay together in their tent. I saw you with that child today, he replied, tracing patterns on her bare shoulder. And I realized something I hadn't considered before. Which is? His hand moved to rest gently on her stomach, what our child might look like wearing a crown of wildflowers. The simple, unexpected sentiment brought tears to Elijah's eyes. In all their planning, all their strategy, they had never spoken of a future so personal, so precious. First we win a throne, she whispered, covering his hand with hers. Then we speak of heirs to sit upon it. But as they drifted to sleep, the crown of ages glowed with new purpose, as if blessing not just their union but the possibility of what might come from it, a true joining of old magic and new empire, of rebellion and legacy. 3 days later, they rejoined their main force, now swollen to over 20,000 strong. The road to the imperial capital lay open before them. The imperial capital rose before them, its white marble walls gleaming in the morning sun. Elijah led her army across the final plain, the crown of ages blazing upon her brow, her copper hair streaming behind her like a battle standard. Beside her rode Alaric, no longer the calculating prince but a man transformed by love and purpose. Behind them marched 25,000 souls, farmers who had abandoned their plows, merchants who had closed their shops, former imperial soldiers who had cast aside their oaths to the emperor, all united by the promise of the crown. The eastern gate is least defended, Alaric advised as they approached the city. The imperial barracks are on the western side. Before Elijah could respond, the ground before them erupted. Fissures tore through the earth, releasing plumes of sulfurous smoke. From these unnatural chasms crawled misshapen creatures, once human, now twisted by dark magic into weapons of war. Blood magic, General Kaida spat, drawing her sword. The emperor sacrifices his own people to create abominations. The crown flared as Elijah sensed the corruption. Form a defensive line, she commanded. These poor souls were not willing sacrifices, we will give them mercy. The battle joined as the twisted creatures attacked with unnatural strength. Rebel soldiers fought valiantly, but the abominations felt no pain, continuing to fight even with grievous wounds. Elijah raised her white wood staff, channeling the crown's power. A wave of purifying light swept across the battlefield. The twisted creatures froze, then slowly straightened, their forms partially restored. With expressions of desperate gratitude, they collapsed into dust, finally released from their torment. He turns his own subjects into monsters, Elijah said, her voice carrying across the suddenly silent battlefield. Is this the emperor you would die for? She called to the soldiers watching from the city walls. The gates of the imperial capital creaked open, but instead of an attacking force, a stream of citizens emerged, first a trickle, then a flood. The remaining imperial guards on the walls threw down their weapons. They're surrendering, Alaric said in disbelief. No, Elijah corrected, watching the approaching civilians. They're choosing. They entered the city without further bloodshed, the citizens lining the streets to witness the return of the crown of ages. Many wept at the sight, dropping to their knees in recognition of ancient magic restored. He waits in the throne room, an elderly palace servant informed them as they reached the imperial palace. He sent away all servants and guards hours ago. Elijah turned to her generals. Secure the palace and the city, Alaric and I will confront the emperor. My queen, General Kaida protested, at least take a guard detail. The crown is my protection, Elijah replied, and I will not risk more lives unnecessarily. Alaric's hand found hers as they ascended the grand staircase leading to the throne room. Together, he reminded her. Always, she affirmed. The massive doors to the throne room swung open at their approach. Inside, the once magnificent chamber had been desecrated. Arcane symbols covered the marble floor, drawn in what could only be blood. Candles made of human fat burned with unnatural blue flames. On the golden throne sat Emperor Valen, Alaric's father. Once an imposing figure, he now appeared shrunken, his skin gray and hanging loose on his frame. Dark energy crackled around him like black lightning. The traitor returns with his whore, the emperor rasped, his voice like stones grinding together. My own son and the last Thalashan bitch. Alaric stepped forward protectively. Father, it's over, the city has surrendered, your army is gone. Nothing is over while I draw breath, Valen snarled. I offered the old powers everything, blood, sacrifice, my very essence. They have made me more than human. They've made you less, Elijah countered, the crown brightening in response to the dark magic. The crown rejected you all those years ago because it saw this darkness in your heart. The emperor's laughter echoed unnaturally. The crown, always the cursed crown, I could have been a god without its interference, his gaze fixed on Alaric. And you, I should have drowned you at birth like the others. The others, Alaric asked, a new horror dawning on his face. You were the seventh son born to your mother, Valen revealed with cruel pleasure. The others showed signs of the old magic, unacceptable weakness. His twisted smile revealed blackened teeth. Your mother tried to save the sixth, that's why she had to die. Rage and grief contorted Alaric's features. With a cry, he drew his sword and charged forward, ignoring Elijah's warning shout. The Emperor gestured casually. Black energy lashed out like a whip, catching Alaric mid-stride and hurling him against a marble column. He crumpled to the floor, blood spreading from a wound in his side. Alaric, Elijah rushed to his side, heart pounding with fear. Now chosen queen, the Emperor mocked, rising from his throne, face me alone. Elijah gently laid Alaric down, her hand coming away red with his blood. She stood, the crown of ages transforming from a simple circlet to an elaborate headdress of light and power. You never understood the crown's purpose, she said, advancing toward the throne. It doesn't grant power, it channels responsibility. Sentimental nonsense, Valen spat, black energy gathering around his hands. Power is power. He struck first, sending a bolt of corrupt magic toward her heart. The crown's barrier deflected it, sending it crashing into the ceiling. Chunks of masonry rained down as Elijah returned fire with a beam of pure white energy. The Emperor howled as the light touched him, his corrupted flesh smoking on contact. He retaliated with increasing desperation, hurling objects and magic alike. The throne room shook with their battle, ancient artifacts shattering under the magical onslaught. Through it all, Elijah maintained her focus, drawing on everything Eldara had taught her. The crown responded to her clarity of purpose, its power flowing through her not as a weapon but as a restoration. With each exchange, the Emperor weakened while Elijah grew stronger. Finally, with a scream of rage, Valen channeled all his remaining power into a single devastating attack. The black energy surged toward Elijah like a tidal wave of corruption. Instead of defending, she opened herself completely to the crown, becoming a vessel for its ancient purpose. Light exploded outward from her form, meeting the darkness. For a moment, the two forces hung in perfect balance. Then the light pushed forward, consuming the darkness inch by inch until it reached the Emperor himself. Valen screamed as the purifying light touched him, revealing him not as the god he claimed to be, but as a frail old man consumed by his own hatred. The black energy dissipated, leaving him collapsed on the steps of the throne. Finish it, he wheezed, glaring up at her with undimmed hatred. Prove you're just like me. Elijah stood over him, the crown's power at its zenith. I am nothing like you, she replied. Your life is not mine to take. Justice will decide your fate. She turned away from him, rushing back to where Alaric lay motionless. To her horror, his breathing had grown shallow, his skin ashen from blood loss. Alaric, she whispered, gathering him in her arms. Stay with me, please. Behind her, the Emperor found enough strength for one final act of malice. Drawing a concealed dagger, he lunged toward Elijah's unprotected back. The crown flared in warning. Elijah turned, raising her hand instinctively. A pulse of energy caught Valen mid-leap, suspending him in the air. His eyes widened in shock before the light intensified, consuming him completely. When it faded, nothing remained but dust drifting to the marble floor. Elijah, Alaric's weak voice drew her attention back to him. Is it over? Yes, my love, she answered, tears streaming down her face as she cradled him. But you're hurt, badly. His hand weakly grasped hers. At least, I got to see you on that throne. No, she said fiercely, you will see much more than that. You will see our reign, our future. Her voice broke. Our children wearing crowns of wildflowers. The crown of ages pulsed as if responding to her plea. Elijah closed her eyes, reaching for its deepest power, not destruction but healing. The crown had chosen her not just as a weapon against corruption, but as a restorer of balance. Please, she whispered to the ancient magic, I don't want a throne without him beside me. Light flowed from the crown through her hands into Alaric's broken body. The wound in his side began to close, color returning to his pale cheeks. His eyes fluttered open, confusion giving way to wonder as he felt the crown's healing power. Elijah, he breathed, strength returning to his voice. What did you do? She helped him to his feet, steadying him as he gained his balance. The crown doesn't just destroy, it heals, it builds. She looked around at the damaged throne room. It restores what was broken. 6 months later, the imperial capital celebrated the coronation of its new monarchs. Queen Elijah, bearing the crown of ages, and King Alaric, wearing a simple golden circlet, stood before their people on the palace balcony. The city had been transformed. Gardens bloomed where barracks once stood. The dark magic that had tainted the land under Emperor Valen's reign had been cleansed, crops growing in once barren fields. In their private chambers that night, Elijah removed the crown of ages for the first time since it had appeared to her in that prison cell. It rested on a cushion, its light gentle and approving. "I never thought I'd see you without it," Alaric commented, wrapping his arms around her from behind. She leaned into his embrace. "The crown has done its work, it chose me to restore balance and balance has returned." Her hand drifted to her stomach where the first signs of swelling had begun to show. "Now we have other work to do." Alaric's hand covered hers, his touch reverent, a heir for the restored empire. A child who,